At the class reunion, my ex-wife stared blankly at the engagement ring on my hand. As she was leaving, she finally couldn't help but stop my car. "Barnaby, can you really let go of me?" she asked. At that moment, I was on the phone with my fiancée. "Are you busy? Am I disturbing you?" my fiancée asked gently, hearing the noisy background. I glanced at my ex-wife's gloomy expression and quietly closed the car window. "It's nothing. Just someone I don't know well," I replied. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. At the class reunion, drinks were flowing freely. Just as the party was in full swing, Rowena moved my glass away and replaced it with orange juice. "Have you forgotten about your sensitive stomach? Don't push yourself. It's not good for your health." The air suddenly froze, falling into a brief silence. Perhaps she had forgotten that we had divorced 3 years ago. Rowena Sinclair and I could be described as having an ill-fated connection. We were childhood friends, always together since we were young. In our final year of secondary school, Rowena and I made a pact to attend university in Westminster Center. We made wishes under a sky full of stars. That night, she secretly kissed my cheek. We imagined countless beautiful futures. But before those imagined futures could arrive, we encountered an unexpected setback. Rowena's father went bankrupt. They sold their house in the city center and moved back to the countryside. I called her several times, but she never answered. Just like that, we abruptly lost contact. When we met again, it was a year later. I had successfully enrolled in the university in Westminster Center as we had planned. During a dinner gathering, I happened to glimpse Rowena clearing plates on the opposite side of the room. I sat side by side with my roommates, chatting about how the food from a certain counter on the second floor of the canteen was awful, how the teaching quality of a particular professor was mediocre, and how the Tai Chi taught in PE class was overly complicated. Meanwhile, Rowena, wearing a worn and dirty t-shirt, covered by a uniform apron with the restaurant's logo, was expressionlessly cleaning the messy tables. When our eyes met for a moment, she froze, then hurriedly ran away. Later, I learned that Rowena hadn't taken her A-levels. Shortly after her family's bankruptcy, her father passed away from worry and depression. The following year, her mother abandoned her and remarried. Without any support, Rowena embarked on a journey of drifting from place to place. The vows we made under the shooting stars had ultimately come to nothing. Our next encounter was when I actively sought her out. This time, I didn't give her a chance to escape. I held her in my arms, not saying a word. This embrace alone expressed my endless longing. At that moment, Rowena finally let down all her defenses and burst into tears in my arms. I said, "Do you want to come with me?" She nodded. "Let's never be apart again." I started saving money and living frugally. I stopped going out for meals, ordering takeaways, and participating in unnecessary activities. I moved out of the dormitory and rented a flat off campus to live with Rowena. Although Westminster Center was quite expensive, I wasn't one to splurge. With my parents' support, we managed to live comfortably. After university, I landed a high-paying job thanks to my excellent academic credentials. The following year, I proposed to Rowena. With tears in her eyes, she humbly asked, "I don't have the education or family background to match yours. I have nothing. Are you sure about someone like me?" "Yes, absolutely. Only you will do. Because I love only Rowena. And Rowena is one of a kind," I assured her confidently. After we married, Rowena became a full-time housewife. One day, I came home to find her reading a magazine about business development. She seemed quite interested in it. "Would you like to give it a try?" I asked, pointing at the magazine. She shook her head dejectedly and said self-deprecatingly, "I only have a secondary school education. How could I possibly manage something like this? Even if I tried, I'd probably end up like my father. How do you know the outcome if you haven't even started?" I encouraged her because I wanted her to be happy and become accomplished, so she could confidently accept herself. So, I took her hand and said resolutely, "Let's do this together. I'll be your investor." Rowena had a natural talent for finance. It was a gift she was born with, Before long, she had started a small company, and its prospects were looking very bright. But she still lacked confidence. Whenever she doubted herself, I would praise her generously. Our Rowena is so amazing, running the company so well, making so much money in just the first year, far more impressive than me. Flattered by my words, Rowena giggled, covering her mouth. You're such a sweet talker. I swear I'm telling the truth. Rowena is the best, Rowena is the most capable. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll be the one struggling to keep up with you. I lay on the sofa, watching the sunset shine through the balcony and bathe Rowena in its glow. I chuckled softly as I caressed her face. When that time comes, I hope Miss Sinclair won't look down on an unremarkable worker like me. Silly, Rowena chided gently, nestling into my arms. I would never do that, because I love Barnaby Castle. And Barnaby is one of a kind. The turning point in my relationship with Rowena Sinclair came in the second year after her company went public. That was the year Crispin Chamberlain appeared. Like Rowena, Crispin's father had gone bankrupt, and his mother had remarried. Perhaps out of sympathy, Rowena gave Crispin, who only had a college diploma, a coveted position in her company that others could only dream of. However, Crispin didn't possess the same talent as Rowena. He often made mistakes at work, but Rowena was always extremely forgiving. Once, I couldn't help but remind her, that Crispin in your company, he doesn't seem quite up to his current job, does he? I think it might be better to start him off as a junior employee. You don't understand these things, Rowena said casually as she sat in front of her vanity, applying lipstick. I certainly know more about company matters than you do, so you needn't worry about it. After she finished speaking, she pulled out a leopard print coat from her wardrobe and put it on. I'm not sure when it started, but Rowena had begun to favor these vibrant colors. It began with accessories, then lipstick, and finally clothing. There was nothing wrong with this, really. I loved seeing Rowena confident and outgoing. It's just that this confident and outgoing Rowena seemed to be gradually becoming someone different from the Rowena I used to know. I am reminded again of our early days together. Back then, Rowena had suffered an unexpected miscarriage. She was devastated for a long time, even falling into a state of despair at one point. Every night, I would hold her waist and gently console her. We can have children in the future. Promise me you won't be sad anymore. All right? It pains me to see you hurting yourself like this. After a moment of silence, Rowena turned and embraced me. Barnaby, I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. I softly stroked her hair and kissed her forehead. Don't be afraid. I'm here with you. I'm so useless. I can't do anything right. I have no qualifications, my family went bankrupt, and now I can't even carry a pregnancy to term. I'm so stupid. It's not your fault. Rowena, you being alive and well in this world is already more than enough. No matter what, I love you. Rowena broke down sobbing. In the darkness of our room, two passionate souls collided. Gradually, Rowena's mood improved, but the miscarriage had left a significant emotional scar. As a result, we started using contraception temporarily. I never pressured her, only telling her over and over, I love you. Later, as Rowena's company grew larger, she never brought up having children again. One night, after my shower, I got into bed and wrapped my arm around Rowena's waist as usual. She reflexively pushed me away. I was stunned. Realizing I had no ulterior motives, she apologetically took my hand and said, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to. Barnaby, the company is in a growth phase right now, so I'm not planning on having children yet. Besides, didn't you say before that you'd respect my choice? That you'd love me whether we had kids or not? I had said that it's true. Even now, my feelings haven't changed at all. But did she really need to recoil from me like she'd seen a ghost? Rowena's company was thriving, even surpassing the one I worked for. Meanwhile, Crispin Chamberlain, leveraging Rowena's favor, gradually established himself in the company. Their phone conversations became increasingly frequent. There were even several times when he called during meals or before bedtime. One weekend, I had originally planned a date with Rowena. Everything was ready, and we were about to leave when Rowena's phone rang. It was Crispin calling. Rowena asked me to wait a moment, then she dashed into the study. I could only stand outside the study, waiting silently. However, Rowena, thinking I might enter, came over and locked the door. I didn't know if they were discussing business matters or not, but regardless, it made me feel uncomfortable. When Rowena came out, she noticed my mood and voluntarily explained, "It was about company business." I nodded, not wanting to continue the conversation. But it seemed that once Crispin was mentioned, she couldn't stop talking about him. Crispin is quite a good chap, hardworking and dedicated to the company. You should be happy for me that I have such talent in my company. I replied absent-mindedly. Crispin secured his current position shortly after graduation, which is far more impressive compared to you. It's normal for you to feel hostile towards him, but I don't want you to let your jealousy grow and affect our life together. Jealousy? Isn't it? You're just a junior employee, while Crispin has gone much further at such a young age. You feel unbalanced. How could you think that? Because that's the impression you give me. We couldn't talk anymore. It felt as if continuing this conversation would shatter our relationship like a glass dropped on the floor, breaking into countless pieces. Our lovely date was ruined. Both of us became upset. After that, Rowena always used work as an excuse to stay out late, as if she was deliberately avoiding me. We had fewer and fewer interactions, and even casual chats over meals became a luxury. But I didn't want it to be this way. Taking advantage of my day off, I decided to visit her at the office. I wanted to mend our relationship. Just as I reached her office door, I heard Rowena shouting angrily. She rarely lost her temper. Even during those darkest days in sixth form, she would only shut herself away, constantly battling her inner demons. I had always believed Rowena was a gentle person. This was the first time I'd seen her like this. You're still lying. Crispin is standing right here, and you heard what he just said. He never asked you to change the proposal. No, Ms. Sinclair, Crispin really did tell me. I don't like people who are full of lies. You've been interning at our company for 6 months, right? Pack your things and leave tomorrow. There was a loud bang as something was thrown to the ground. Then the door opened. Rowena seemed slightly surprised to see me. After composing herself, she shouted, "Get out!" to the intern. Rowena appeared to be quite angry. I planned to calm her down first, then ask about what had happened to see if I could help. Unexpectedly, Crispin blocked my way. "Mr. Castle, I advise you not to get involved. Let Miss Sinclair calm down first. She's not in a good mood, so don't bother her." I looked at Crispin in astonishment. He was indeed young and handsome. Upon closer inspection, he even resembled me a bit from my school days. But while the passage of time was evident in my appearance, it wasn't in his. "I'm here to see my own wife. What right do you have to interfere?" I patted Crispin's shoulder. "Young man, aren't you overstepping?" I thought Crispin Chamberlain, even if not competent at work, was at least someone who could read the room. To my surprise, he stood directly in my way, showing no sign of backing down. Just as I was about to lose my temper, Rowena Sinclair spoke up. "That's enough, Crispin. You can go now. There's no need to be so harsh on Barnaby." Only after hearing Rowena's words did Crispin reluctantly leave. Rowena sat in her executive chair, rubbing her temples in frustration. I silently picked up the scattered documents from the floor, arranged them neatly, and placed them back on the desk. Rowena glanced at me. "Why didn't you give me a heads up before coming?" My heart skipped a beat. I forced a bitter smile, pretending everything was fine. "I wanted to surprise you." "Oh, what surprise?" Her tone was utterly flat, even bordering on impatient. I hesitated, then pulled out a necklace from my pocket and handed it to her. "Do you like it?" She replied without even looking at it. "It's fine, thanks." After a moment of silence, I smiled and said, "Let me put it on for you." I moved behind her, but she stood up. "No need. I'll put it on myself later." Rowena seemed to avoid any physical contact with me, but she used to love sticking close to me before. The atmosphere grew awkward. I tried to change the subject. Rowena, my mum said she's going back to her place in a few days. Please don't call me by my first name in the office. She interrupted me before I could finish. You should address me as Ms. Sinclair. I was stunned. When our eyes met, she hurriedly looked away. I just worry that using first names too often might undermine my authority in the company. And people might gossip behind my back. Perhaps realizing her words were inappropriate, she added, I don't mean anything by it. Once again, we parted on bad terms. As she was about to leave, she suddenly called out to me, I'm planning to invite Crispin over for dinner tonight. Tonight? Couldn't help but ask. What's wrong? Do you have plans tonight? It seemed she had completely forgotten what day it was. But I clearly remembered that Rowena used to look forward to our wedding anniversary more than anything else. She used to say she would cook a table full of dishes, and we would eat from noon until afternoon. After eating, we'd go for a walk, see the fountains and rockeries in the park, and watch elderly couples sitting close together on benches, chatting about trivial matters. We were supposed to explore every corner until our legs ached, until she would climb onto my back, playfully complaining, My feet are so tired, can you rub them for me? Finally, as the sun set, we would walk hand in hand into the fading light. But we only managed to do this once. Barnaby, Rowena waved her hand at me. Why aren't you saying anything? If you're busy tonight, just go about your business. Don't worry about me. If I don't worry about you, what do you plan to do? I'll go out to eat with Crispin. It's his birthday today, and I want to celebrate with him. A boss celebrating an employee's birthday? I sneered. Rowena caught the implication in my words and frowned in displeasure. What's wrong with you today? Even if you're in a bad mood, there's no need to come here just to pick a fight. What's the point? I'm asking you, is it normal for a boss to celebrate an employee's birthday? Answer me. Rowena's face immediately darkened. She glared at me, her voice turning icy. I just think Crispin is a good person, and I see potential in him. I said nothing, just staring back at her. She held my gaze for a few seconds before looking away. After a moment, she sighed, putting on an exasperated expression as if I were being unreasonable. I only see him as a younger brother. If you insist on thinking otherwise, there's nothing I can do about it. Rowena and I had entered a Cold War period. Despite living under the same roof, we were seeing each other less and less frequently. Until one day, when my company sent me on a month-long business trip out of town. I thought to myself, we can't go on like this. I need to calm down and have a proper talk with her. I went to her company to find her again. This time, I was stopped right at the reception. Mr. Castle, Miss Sinclair says you need to make an appointment to see her. An appointment? I laughed, loosening my tie. I'm her husband. Do I really need an appointment? Yes, sir. I stormed out of the company in anger, but I ran into Rowena and Crispin returning from outside. Rowena saw me and asked with furrowed brows, Do you need something? Where have you two been? I asked directly, ignoring her question. What do you mean by that? Rowena's face darkened. Do I need to report my whereabouts to you? Rowena! I couldn't help but shout at her. Seeing this, Crispin stepped in front of Rowena protectively. Mr. Castle, Ms. Sinclair and I. Shut up, I warned, pointing at his face. Rowena's expression immediately turned black. Barnaby, this is the company, not a place for you to throw a drunken fit. Don't go too far, she said, swatting my hand away. Also, I hired Crispin. I suggest you be polite to him. The eyes of all the employees in the company focused on us. Rowena looked around and after a while, she compromised. Let's talk about this when we get home. Don't make a scene here and disrupt the employees' work. With that light remark, she pushed all the responsibility onto me. In an instant, I had become an inconsiderate husband who came to his wife's company to make trouble. Looking at Rowena's reproachful eyes, I left heartbroken. But this wasn't what I had intended. I had come to make peace. Yet I found that the more I tried to save this marriage, the more it fell apart. In the end, I couldn't even say a proper goodbye to her. On the night of my business trip, Rowena sent me a message. Where are you? On a business trip. Why didn't you say anything? No need to. The screen showed that she was typing, repeatedly, but I never received another reply. The day I returned from my business trip, I was determined to have a frank discussion with Rowena. Whether we reconciled or parted ways, we needed a resolution. However, before I could speak, Rowena thrust a pregnancy test result at me. She was pregnant. The child was Crispin's. Rowena sat calmly on the sofa, applying a face mask. Crispin and I, it was just an accident. We were both drunk that night. Neither of us was thinking clearly. I haven't told Crispin about the pregnancy yet. He's just started his career. He probably couldn't handle this kind of pressure. I want to keep the baby. After all, it's my own flesh and blood. I can't bear to terminate the pregnancy. Barnaby, we've been together for so many years. I hope you can understand and support me. If you can accept it, once this child is born, you'll be the father. I'll make things clear with Crispin. He'll never find out. Rowena finished her long speech and walked over to me, handing me a glass of milk. She earnestly tried to persuade me. Haven't you always wanted a child? Well, I'm giving you a chance. It's up to you whether you can seize it or not. She finished speaking and looked at me playfully, as if certain I would accept her proposal. What do you take me for? I looked at her, feeling indignant. When you said you didn't want children, I respected that because I love you. I didn't want you to be hurt because of me. But that doesn't mean I can tolerate you using someone else's child to provoke me. Rowena hadn't expected this response from me. She narrowed her eyes, her face turning ashen. After a moment of tense silence, she spoke coldly. Didn't you say you'd love me forever? If this is all you can manage, your love seems rather shallow, doesn't it? Rowena's words were like shards of metal, shredding my heart piece by piece. Staying any longer would only make things worse. I turned to leave, but Rowena called out to stop me. You're still such a failure. You can't measure up to Crispin, and you can't measure up to me. Now you're running away again? At least give me a clear answer. My chest heaved violently. I turned back, striding towards her, and raised my hand. Rowena didn't back down. She even tilted her head forward, bringing her face closer. What? You want to hit me? Go on then, hit me. I'll report you for domestic violence. The deeper the love, the more profound the hatred. I looked at Rowena, overwhelmed with emotions, but unable to utter a single word. Let's divorce, I finally said quietly. Coming to her senses, Rowena Sinclair realized her behavior was inappropriate. She pressed her lips together and fell silent. I disdainfully set aside the orange juice she had handed me, reclaimed my wine glass, and nonchalantly raised a toast. She froze for a moment, then said nothing more. Our classmates, noticing the awkwardness, quickly tried to smooth things over. Well, childhood sweethearts indeed. After all these years, still looking out for each other. Exactly. As they say, if not lovers, then family. Oh, by the way, Rowena, I heard you married Crispin Chamberlain? How come he's not here today? When Rowena and I got married, it was during her most insecure and vulnerable period. As a result, she never told anyone about our marriage and subsequent divorce. In everyone's minds, Rowena had only been married once, and that was to Crispin Chamberlain. He couldn't make it, Rowena said, lowering her head with an awkward smile. Why not? Too busy. No, it's not that. Rowena fidgeted nervously with her clothes, then glanced at me furtively. We didn't get on well after the wedding and divorced not long after. Oh, a collective sigh of sympathy. After a brief pause, our classmates began to change the subject. But Rowena's gaze was drawn to the ring on my finger. She stared at it blankly for a good while before finally asking, Are you married? Not yet, but soon, I replied casually, taking a sip of my wine. Speaking of which, why didn't you bring your future wife along for a chat? Still keeping her hidden away? Our class president joked. That's right. Rowena's been abroad and doesn't know about your engagement. You should have brought your fiancée to introduce her to Rowena. Why yes, It's so sudden, I had no idea. Rowena's breath caught for a moment. Then she forced a bitter laugh and made a show of raising her glass to me. I'd really like to see what your fiancé looks like. I didn't return her toast. Instead, I raised my glass and drained it, smiling at the group. She's not feeling well, resting at home. Another time, I'll definitely bring her along. The atmosphere livened up again. But Rowena had lost all interest in chatting and eating. As the gathering ended, everyone headed home. When I got into my car to leave, Rowena stopped me. Barnaby, can we talk? A light drizzle had started outside, dampening her clothes. Are you busy? Am I bothering you? My fiancé's gentle voice came through the phone. I glanced at Rowena's dejected expression and quietly closed the car window. It's nothing, just someone I don't know well. As the car drove away, Rowena was left alone in the rain, her spirits visibly crushed. The next day, I went to work at the company as usual. Near noon, a colleague came over and called out to me, "There's someone at the entrance saying she's your wife. She's brought you lunch." Barnaby, you lucky dog. Puzzled, I turned my head and saw Rowena. Can we talk? She pleaded again. I sighed helplessly and led her to the rooftop. What do you want to talk about? Make it quick, I said curtly. We were husband and wife after all. Is it necessary to be so rude and distant? She gave a bitter laugh and slowly approached me. How have you been these past few years? If all you want is small talk, I'm afraid I'll have to excuse myself. I turned to leave, but Rowena anxiously grabbed my clothes. Wait! I shook off her hand in disgust. Look, Rowena, let me be clear. I'm very happy now, and I won't be your fallback option. Do you hate me that much? Yes. Rowena froze in place. Her eyes dimmed slightly, and she nervously licked her dry lips. But she quickly regained her composure. They say there's no hatred without love. I don't believe you have no feelings for me at all. She walked to the edge of the railing, looking down at the view below, then continued, You're in such a rush to get engaged, perhaps deliberately to show me that ring. Barnaby, after we separated, I realized that the person I truly loved was you all along. Crispin and I were just a mistake, so we were doomed from the start. You are my final destination. I know you still care about me too. You still can't let me go. Let's start over, shall we? Don't you find those words ridiculous? I adjusted my cuffs. I already have a fiancé. Stop bothering me. I left those words behind and walked away without looking back. As I was leaving, I heard her muttering to herself, Can years of feelings really be forgotten so completely? I don't believe it. I'll wait for you to change your mind. Rowena Sinclair returned home feeling dejected. Mummy, why do you look so sad today? A little girl came running out of the house to greet her. The girl looked quite young, her speech not yet fluent. She was Rowena's child with Crispin Chamberlain. Rowena paused for a moment, then pulled the little girl into her arms and asked, Griselda, would you like to have a daddy? Daddy? Didn't Daddy leave? He doesn't want me and Mummy anymore. Griselda doesn't want Daddy. Rowena shook her head. Not that Daddy, another Daddy. Another Daddy? The little girl was confused. Do I have two daddies? Rowena smiled and gently pinched the little girl's nose. The other daddy is very gentle, very attentive, and responsible in everything he does. He's liked me for a very long time, but there was a misunderstanding along the way. However, Mummy knows he still loves me, and he'll love Griselda too. Why don't we forget about our old daddy and go find this new daddy? What do you think? Yes, yes. Griselda will have a new daddy. Mummy is so great. But what, Mummy? Mummy and new daddy had a little argument. New daddy is angry, so Mummy needs some time to make him feel better. Once new daddy calms down and realizes that Mummy is still the person he loves most, he'll remarry Mummy. Griselda understands. The little girl planted a kiss on Rowena's cheek. New daddy is so petty, not gentlemanly at all. But Griselda wants a daddy. Mummy, do your best to bring new daddy back. Rowena nodded, holding the little girl in her arms, her gaze growing more profound. I will. He'll definitely come back to me. A few days later, Rowena secretly sent a message to Barnaby. I'm sick and there's no one to take care of me at home. Can you come and check on me? Rowena had carefully timed her message. She had found out that Barnaby was supposed to go on a trip with his fiancée this weekend. Would he disregard her completely, or would he be willing to abandon his plans with his fiancée to see his ex-wife? Rowena was eager to find out. Although she felt somewhat uncertain and afraid, her desire to reconcile overshadowed these small feelings of unease. She even began to convince herself that Barnaby loved her so much. How could he bear to let her suffer? What did it matter that they had been apart for 3 years? What did it matter that he had a fiancée? Everything could start anew. Rowena waited patiently. She waited from morning until night. By the time her daughter returned from nursery school, Rowena still hadn't seen Barnaby come to her house. He hadn't even sent a single message of concern. How could this be possible? Had he truly stopped loving her completely? No, that couldn't be right. He must have carelessly missed her message. Or perhaps he had decided to come, but was held up by his fiancée? Rowena imagined countless possibilities in her mind. Mom, what are we having for dinner tonight? The little girl walked up to Rowena, holding her tummy. Griselda is hungry. Only then did Rowena realize that she had been waiting at home all day without doing anything, not even cooking dinner. I'm sorry, Griselda. Rowena ruffled the girl's hair. Mummy was thinking too much about Daddy and forgot to make dinner. You'll forgive Mummy, won't you? Does Mummy like the new Daddy that much? The little girl asked with a pout. Yes, I like him very, very much. Then why haven't I seen Mummy with the new Daddy before? Griselda has never met the new Daddy. The little girl scratched her face, looking puzzled. If Mummy likes the new Daddy so much, why is Griselda's real daddy someone else? Rowena stood frozen in place. Her gaze was unfocused, her lips parting slightly but no sound coming out. She believed her relationship with Barnaby had reached this point for valid reasons, out of necessity, but when pressed to explain, she found herself at a loss for words. She felt troubled, flustered, and angry. What do children know? And so a barrage of scolding came down. This was the first time she had ever lost her temper with her daughter. Mummy shouted at Griselda. Mummy's bad. The little girl, frightened by Rowena's sudden outburst, ran crying back to her room. Rowena sat on the sofa, breathing heavily, trying to calm herself down. She opened her phone and clicked on Barnaby's chat window, still seeing no reply. But on his social media, she saw a photo he had posted of himself with his wife. The two of them were cuddled up together, smiling so sweetly, just like she and Barnaby used to. Rowena felt an indescribable sensation, as if something was churning in her stomach. She wanted to be sick but couldn't, left only with a bitter taste. She angrily threw her phone onto the sofa. She wasn't ready to give up. She truly, genuinely wasn't ready to give up. He must still be angry. He must still be upset that I chose Crispin back then, instead of fighting to keep him. Yes, he's just throwing a tantrum. Rowena repeated these thoughts to herself. The next day, Rowena woke up groggily on the sofa. It was still dark outside. She felt exhausted, without even the strength to lift her hand. What had started as a ploy to get Barnaby to come over had turned into a real case of flu and fever. Her throat hurt. Her head felt fuzzy. Rowena pushed herself up into a sitting position. She looked around at the darkness and silence surrounding her. She thought if Barnaby were here, she wouldn't be waking up alone and feverish in the middle of the night with no one to care for her. If Barnaby were here, he would have already nagged her several times to take better care of herself, then spoon-fed her porridge he made himself. If Barnaby were here, she would be tucked up in bed right now, wrapped in his warm embrace. But Barnaby wasn't here. Rowena Sinclair spent several days at home in a daze. Upon hearing that Barnaby Castle had returned from his trip, she gathered some old mementos that held their fond memories and sent them all to Barnaby's house. Among them were their wedding photos. These items should have been discarded when they divorced, but Rowena couldn't bring herself to do it. The wedding photos held special significance for both of them. Rowena still remembered what Barnaby had said to her during their wedding photo shoot. "Are you nervous?" he had asked. "Of course I am. But why do you look so calm?" she wondered. He smiled. "I've rehearsed this day in my dreams many times." As they embraced, Barnaby said to her, "Rowena, I love you. I hope you'll be my wife forever. Grow old with me and never part." She cried tears of joy and joked, "This is a lifelong commitment, you know? Are you sure about this?" "Of course. I swear. If I ever break this vow, then—" Rowena gently covered Barnaby's lips with her hand and smiled. "I promise to be your wife forever, grow old with you, and never part. If I break this vow, may I grow old alone and never find happiness." Rowena caressed the photo frame, snapping back to reality from her memories. After sending these items, she texted Barnaby, "Tomorrow at 6 p.m. I'll be waiting at the place of our first date." She was trying to hold on to him with these fragments of their past. She was taking a gamble. If he still had even a hint of lingering feelings, if seeing these old mementos could remind him of their happy days together, he would come back, wouldn't he? Monday, sunny. I returned home from work, and my fiancée brought out a box of miscellaneous items for me. "The recipient is your name, sent to you." Such a big box. I don't know what it is. I puzzled open the parcel. Inside were actually souvenirs I had bought for Rowena Sinclair before and our wedding photos. "These are—" My fiancé looked at these old items, hesitating to speak. I was furious, carrying these rubbish downstairs and throwing them into the public rubbish bin in the estate. Then I took a photo and sent it to Rowena. "Unwanted rubbish belongs in the bin, people included." Then I blocked her. Actually, I had blocked her once before. As early as the moment we decided to divorce, we had no more contact. It's just that later she changed her phone number and got in touch with me again. By then she had married Crispin Chamberlain, and only occasionally sent me messages about class reunions, so I didn't bother much. I didn't expect her to come back and go crazy, even interfering with my life. I irritably smoked a cigarette downstairs. When I returned, my fiancée was waiting for me. She didn't say anything, just gently took off my coat. "Let's eat. I specially stewed fish soup today, have more." I had mentioned Rowena's matter to her before, but only briefly. But I didn't expect her to not ask a single word, just welcoming me home as usual. I watched her bring out the dishes one by one, and we sat down face to face. "Why don't you ask me?" I said, tasting the fish soup. "If you want to talk about it, you'll definitely open up. If you don't want to talk about it, you naturally have your reasons." My fiancé smiled gently, picking up a piece of ribs for me. "I trust your character." After dinner, my fiancé and I sat side by side on the sofa. With nothing to do, I told her about Rowena. We grew up together since childhood, and confirmed our relationship in university. Later we got married. I helped her start a company, but unexpectedly she had an affair during our marriage. I held my fiancé in my arms, explaining everything. After our divorce, she remarried quickly. The last time we contacted was at a class reunion. She divorced again and wanted to get back together with me, but I didn't agree. I didn't mention it before because this was the first time I gave my all but ended up with nothing. Such an experience was too frustrating. Like a stain, I didn't want to mention it, nor was there any need to mention it. "I know. I understand." My fiancé gently stroked my face, then leaned in to kiss me. "You've been through a lot. It's all over now. I'll bring you happiness from now on." The night passed quickly. Having resolved this emotional knot, my mood improved considerably. For the week after cutting ties with Rowena, my life was relatively peaceful. Until one day, while shopping at the supermarket with my fiancé, we encountered her. A child by her side ran towards me, hugging my legs and calling me, "Daddy." My fiancé crouched down and said patiently, "Little one, you've mistaken him for someone else." "No, I haven't." The little girl forcefully pushed my fiancé away. "Mummy says you're a bad woman who stole my new daddy. Go away. I want daddy and mummy together, not you with daddy." My fiancé and I were both stunned. Rowena gave my fiancé a smug look before pretending to tug at the little girl, though not actually pulling her away. Griselda, darling, you can't speak to the lady like that. Even if you are Daddy's biological daughter, you must respect her. Understand? Biological daughter? My fiancé questioned. Oh dear. I really didn't want to reveal this secret. Rowena covered her mouth, feigning distress and apologizing. I only discovered after divorcing my ex-husband that our daughter wasn't his, but Barnaby's. But you two are about to get married, and I couldn't bear to break you up. However, seeing you so in love, it's truly painful for me. Miss Dalton, as a fellow woman, you must understand the hardships and struggles I face as a mother. I sincerely beg you, please don't fight us for Barnaby. Let him be with us. We need him more than you do. My fiancé looked at me helplessly. I firmly took my fiancé's hand and kicked the little girl away. Rowena, what the bloody hell is wrong with you? I demanded. Rowena Sinclair stared at me in shock. The girl fell to the ground, pitifully seeking Rowena's help. Mummy, it hurts. Daddy is mean, not gentle at all. Mummy lied. Griselda doesn't want Daddy anymore. Rowena hadn't yet recovered from my outburst. She ignored the girl and turned to me instead. What did you just say? If you're deaf, go get treatment. Don't come here making a scene. I pulled my fiancé past them and left. Rowena paused for a moment, biting her lip hard. Her eyes reddened as she watched me walk away, her fingers curling tightly at her sides. She wasn't willing to give up. What she considered rightfully hers was now going against her wishes, turning its back on her. The man who once loved her to the bone was now holding another woman's hand, ignoring her, leaving her behind. Rowena took a deep breath and, disregarding the murmurs of onlookers, turned and shouted after me. That night I sent you a message? I waited for you all night. Did you know that? Why didn't you come? What right did you have not to come? Her voice grew hoarse, but I still didn't stop walking, didn't reply, didn't look back. Rowena finally began to panic. She continued screaming at the top of her lungs. Barnaby Castle, you heartless bastard. You can't treat me like this. If you leave today, we'll never have a chance again. Even if you come back begging me in the future, I won't forgive you. Did you hear me? I won't forgive you. Rowena's words fell on my fiancé's ears. Even though she didn't say anything, her slightly hunched shoulders and wavering gaze betrayed her unease. I gripped her hand tightly to reassure her. Don't pay them any attention. People without sense aren't worth engaging with. They're troublesome and bring bad luck. Don't worry. Let them say what they want. I won't leave you. After this incident, my relationship with my fiancé actually became even closer. She said she would trust me unconditionally. Rowena's test ended up making us cherish each other even more. With the wedding date approaching, we were both busy with various preparations. It was at this time that Rowena appeared again. I was wrong last time. I shouldn't have revealed Griselda's background in front of your fiancé. I apologize to you. I only did it because Griselda kept crying for her father. Griselda is still so young. You, her biological father, are not by her side, and Crispin has divorced me. She's very pitiful. After saying all that, she was still trying to trap me with lies. Is her pitiful situation my fault? I looked at her mockingly. Rowena stood there with her mouth slightly open, dumbfounded. I continued, if you think she's pitiful, why don't you live a good life with her instead of constantly interfering in other people's lives? You weave all kinds of lies, set traps for your daughter, and try to set traps for me, all to satisfy your own selfish desires. Is this what you call the hardships and difficulties of being a mother? Rowena bit her lip, speechless. Why aren't you saying anything? Don't want to? Or have nothing to say? I asked with a smile. That's not it. I'm not lying. Griselda really is your biological daughter. I also truly want to start over with you. Start over? I laughed out loud. What gives you the confidence to think you can start over? Rowena, who do you think you are? You suddenly come here and say these baseless things. You know your intentions clearly. You say Griselda is my daughter? Fine, I happen to be free today. Why don't we go and do a paternity test right now? You don't believe me? Are you worthy of being believed? Rowena stared at me blankly, at a loss for words. If you don't dare to do a paternity test, on what grounds are you insisting she's my daughter? I straightened my collar and said calmly, So, I'm warning you, don't come and disturb me again in the future. If you have even a shred of shame left, keep yourself in check and stop using your illegitimate child to deceive people. If I find out you're secretly trying to undermine my relationship with my fiancé, I won't let you off easy. Rowena's eyes were filled with despair and fear as she looked at me. She let go of her grip, her expression desolate. Why? Why don't you want me anymore? You promised when we got married that you would love me forever. Is love really so fragile that it can't withstand any tests? Why? Do you really not know the reason? Looking at Rowena's broken facade, I felt both disgusted and satisfied. Stop pretending to be innocent with that attitude of yours. Where was your talk of love when you were indifferent to me? Where was your love when you were perfunctory with me? Where was your love when you were secretly sleeping with Crispin? Now that you've divorced Crispin and have no one to rely on, you come running back to me with a bastard child. Talking about love? Bloody hell! Who do you think you're fooling? I vented all my anger, along with my accusations about that ridiculous marriage we once had. Rowena stared at me, dumbfounded. Her lips parted slightly, her voice hoarse and trembling. I just... She tried to come up with some convincing excuses, but after racking her brain, she realized there were no excuses to be found. Just what? I let out a cold laugh. Just that you got carried away after I invested in you and you became successful? Just that you saw me as a common company employee, not good enough for you, the big boss? Just that you couldn't resist when you saw a younger man? Or just that you took advantage of my feelings and did whatever you wanted, even getting pregnant after shagging someone else? Rowena shook her head in disbelief, taking a few steps back, her voice tinged with sobs. No, it's not like that. Not like that? Then tell me, which of the things I just said isn't true? Rowena, are you deceiving yourself? Or are you just playing dumb? Don't you have any self-awareness? Rowena's body trembled, her eyes brimming with tears. I've said all I needed to say. As I said before, don't bother me anymore. Get as far away from me as you can. I gave my final instructions and turned to leave, leaving only one last sentence. You disgust me. I hope we never meet again. Today was a beautiful day with clear skies. The weather was lovely. I felt cheerful. After returning home, I shared this with my fiancée. My fiancée rubbed my shoulders and sighed. If she had known then what she knows now, but it's for the best. For the best. I looked at her quizzically. My fiancé smiled apologetically. Ah, sorry. I meant it's for the best that I met you. I nodded, pulling my fiancée onto my lap and burying my face in her neck. I hope things go smoothly from now on. After this incident, I never saw Rowena again. I heard her company later ran into financial trouble, nearly going bankrupt, and her daughter became comatose after an accident. Crispin gallivanted about, never once visiting her or their daughter. Rowena was left with nothing once again. However, this no longer had anything to do with me.